Imagine if the trailer for your movie dropped. Which of your group chats is going to light up and say, oh my God, we have to go see this, if they didn't know that you had written it? And if you can't tell me which group chats there are, I'm going to wonder, is there an audience for your movie?
Hey, welcome to Arc Studio Presents. I'm Micah Cratty, a WJ screenwriter and the head of writing at Arc Studio, the best screenwriting app in the world. You can check it out at arcstudiopro.com, and there's a link in the description. Now, please, without further ado, put your virtual hands together for Franklin Leonard. Hey, Franklin, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing all right.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited to get into this. I think a lot of people know who you are from the Blacklist, but I think it would probably be helpful for the sake of this discussion to kind of explain your background and how at the Blacklist you're sort of positioned in the nexus between screenwriters and the rest of the industry, which kind of gives you an insight on some of the things that we're talking about.
When I came to Hollywood, my first job in the industry, I was an assistant in the motion picture lit department of Creative Arts Agency. And I think I entered the business thinking that there would be an extraordinary reverence for writers within the business because, no one can do their jobs until a writer does theirs. And I found that not to be the case. Somewhat shocking to me, even still, having been in the business now for 20, coming up on 22 years. And so I was always looking for good material because I thought if I could find good scripts, I saw that like the path to everything else was possible. And that sort of led me from working at CAA to working for a producer named John Goldwyn, and then getting the job at Leonard DiCaprio's production company, working for a guy named Brad Simpson. And my job working for Leo was to find good material and good writers that could write good material for him to star in. And so I'd read 20, 25 screenplays a week, and I would literally just sit on my couch with a bunch of screenplays and read them. And I'd come back on Monday morning and my boss would ask me, Brad would ask me, is there anything I should read? And 9 times out of 10, the answer was no. And again, I was trying to be very diligent. I would call everybody back and tell them what I thought of the script and why I wasn't comfortable sharing it or whatever. And, after a year of that, and very rarely finding anything to be super excited about, my mother used to call me every week and ask me if my LSAT scores were still valid. And I really did not want to go to law school. But one of two things was true at that point. Either my job was to find good screenplays and I was bad at my job, or the job really was to read and pass on screenplays that were not great, in which case I probably needed to find a different job. And so I needed to solve that problem. And that around this time in 2005, I sent an email to 75 of my peers, those are 90 of my peers, and asked them to send me a list of their 10 favorite unproduced screenplays. In exchange, I would send them the combined list. Sent that out under a quasi-subversive name, The Blacklist, and that sort of went viral in the industry at a time when internet virality was still a relatively new concept. And became popular, I think, not because of me or the list, but because the scripts that were on the list were good, right? When people read the stuff that was on the list, they were like, oh, this is actually really good. And I think there's been a virtuous cycle since then whereby people who are interested in great screenplays read the scripts on The Blacklist every year. The ones that they respond to, they then get involved in, and those things go on to be better movies. And it's really remarkable, the success of them.
So now the Blacklist, it started with that annual list, but there's kind of two sides to it, right? You have the annual list of the screenplays that are voted on by industry members, and then you have the marketplace, and that's kind of probably the part of the business that is most applicable to the majority of like aspiring writers. And can you kind of explain a little bit? I think probably you'll know how that works, but like how does, if you're just a writer out there, you don't have representation, you have this script, what does the Blacklist do for you?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about it is this. If you're a writer of anything, if you're a writer of screenplays, of television pilots, of theater plays, of novels, you should create a profile on the Blacklist website, which is free. And that's your standard like Wikipedia, IMDb page, but that's totally under your control and it's been built writer specific. And you have your bio, you have your photo, you can list everything that you've ever written in those 4 categories roughly and describe them. Log line, you can tag it in any number of ways, classify it via genre. And that indexes in our database so that anyone on the industry side of the equation, and that's film and television folks, from agency assistants to studio presidents and A-list actors and directors, that's theater companies, that's and now publishing editors and literary agents. If they wake up one morning and say, oh, I'd love to find something like X, they can go in and search for it, and they can find the fact that you wrote something like that. They won't have access to it immediately. They would need to contact you via the website, and there's a free, sort of correspondence opportunity within the website to say, hey, that's interesting. I'd love to read it, right? So now that's a free profile thing that you can create, etc. If you want to make your work immediately downloadable to those industry professionals who are looking for specific things, you can host your work for $30 a month per piece of material, per screenplay, play, pilot, novel. And that makes it immediately downloadable to anyone on the site. One of the challenges of being a writer is that you're writing your thing and you're hoping that to get somebody's attention and that someone invests in it, right? Like that is fundamentally the challenge. There's also an upside, which is that you can do the thing without anybody else's permission, right? Like you can, like a director can't direct without some resources and some people. An actor needs something to say and someone to direct them. But a writer, you can literally go somewhere and write something and no one can stop you. And there's an opportunity in writing something that is, on its face commercial, that people will say, oh, I read this and I understand that I can make it for less money, that if there's an audience larger than what I can make it for. If you do that, there is an opportunity, but it has to be exceptional. Like it really does need to be flat out something that not everybody, but most people read and say, oh my God, I have to tell other people about this because there's an opportunity here. And I think it's really important to think about like doing all the things. There's what do you want to write as a writer, but it's for that to become the thing that you want it to become, a lot of other people have to get involved and get excited about it. What is it that is going to excite them about what it is that you're writing?
That's interesting because one thing I like to talk to writers about is when you're kind of formulating that and trying to figure out what the exciting thing is, to think about like telling the story of your script to a friend, and like in a way that would make them excited. Like you just saw something great and you're telling someone, and like thinking about your movie that way, like how would you tell this to someone in a way that would make them excited for that? And like, if you can do that, you're on your way to a story that has that sort of element that other people can then excitedly tell someone about. They're like, oh, I saw this thing. And, you kind of can get that word of mouth a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, one way that I think about it, imagine if the trailer for your movie dropped. Which of your group chats is going to light up and say, oh my God, we have to go see this, if they didn't know that you had written it, right? Like, and I'm not saying it's a specific group chat. We're all in many, many different group chats. We all have many different groups of friends, and there are a near infinite number of them worldwide. Like, what group chats are going to light up like crazy when your trailer drops? And if you can't tell me which group chats there are, I'm going to wonder, is there an audience for your movie? The way I think about things, and when I'm reading something, I'm hoping every time I open page one that the rest of the world ceases to exist as soon as I go to page two. And all I care about is these people or these things, whoever the characters are. All I care about is what happens to them. And I am ripping through pages to find out what happens to the people that I got introduced to in this script. And I'll know that something is special when I finish reading the script and I'm a little sad that I can't spend more time in that world with those characters. And at that point, if I start to feel that as a producer, that's when I start to say, okay, how do I figure this out? If I were to get this made, how much would it cost to make this? Is there an audience for it? But first I want to know that like I'm the audience for it, that I had a response to it, right? And if I know that I have a response to it, I can reasonably assume that somebody else will. And now I got to figure out who those people are, how many of them are there, and how much will it cost to make the thing? And then the next step is, who do I make it with? Who will see this the way that I do, so that we can all go make it together?
If you could travel back in time and you were just starting out becoming an upcoming screenwriter, how would you prepare yourself in this modern world of artificial intelligence?
The same way I prepare myself for a world prior to artificial intelligence. I'd become the best writer I can, the best emotional storyteller I can, and that would probably mean, and this is the advice that I give and have given for years, is to consume as much storytelling as possible. Read everything, read the greats, read the not so greats, watch everything, watch the greats, not watch the not so greats. And I'll steal from Scott Myers, who's the official screenwriting blogger for The Blacklist. He does go into the story, read scripts, watch movies, write pages. And then beyond that, like, have some lived emotional experience that, not to be crass about it, but that you can mine because you want to say something about what it means to be human. The thing that is, one of my favorite signs from the WGA strike was AI doesn't have childhood trauma, right? And I loved it because it sort of speaks to where art comes from, which is sort of a fundamental wrestling with what it means to be a human being, and trying to share ideas or thoughts or feelings about what it means to be a human being. And I think that if you focus on that part and focus on the craft of the thing, that really hasn't changed in a world of AI. Look, I may eat my words in 10 years because I don't think anybody knows exactly where we're headed, but I don't see the existence of AI changing what it means to write a great story, which at the end of the day is the thing that people are still desperate to find and acquire because there's money to be made.
As a new screenwriter, should I swing for the fences with a big budget or shoot lower budget? Does smaller budget give you a better shot at being made with everything else being equals?
I mean, if your big budget film has a massive, obvious audience, then yes, swing for the fences. If that's your idea, if you have an idea that justifies a big budget. If you don't have an idea that justifies a big budget, then you need to write something that's so good that it'll get somebody to invest a smaller budget in it. I think the reality is getting any money is hard. So you got to swing for the fences, whatever budget it is, and really ask yourself, like, what's the best script you can write? Right? Like, there's a big difference between writing a $300 million space epic and a $300,000 intimate family drama. And one of those you're probably going to be better at than the other. And whatever it is that you can write best is the thing that you should write first. And the reason I say that is because most scripts are not going to get made, right? Most scripts, even if you attract the attention of industry professionals, are not going to get made. They're going to be the sample that gets you the next job or the opportunity for a conversation with someone who helps you brainstorm the next job. So write the thing that you can write best. Try to give some real thought to who the audience is and make sure that the thing, has a larger audience than the price that it costs to make it. But what can you write best, and what are you going to be most excited to invest all of that time and energy in writing and writing well?
That's interesting. I was having a conversation with a screenwriter friend who recently had broken in and was starting to get a lot of work on big studio projects. And I asked him, what was your sample? What was the thing that got you noticed? And it was so funny because the look on his face, he was very ashamed kind of the thing. Like, I was like, oh, I want to read it. And he didn't want to send it to me. And he's like, it's not good. And I was like, what do you mean it's not good? It's gotten you work. You're working with huge things right now. And what we kind of were unpacking, got to the bottom of, was that it wasn't good formally. It didn't necessarily, like, there were some problems with it. It didn't necessarily look right in some ways. But what we got down to is that what it had was a great voice, and it had a great energy behind it. And I think that's really important in when you're writing your script that you're trying to get noticed, is like, you're trying to market yourself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so what are you offering to the marketplace? Because all the execs know 100 writers who can write a perfect script, formatted, etc., whatever. But what they don't have maybe is that little spark that's you, right? Like, so really, I think a lot of times people kind of focus on the idea of like writing a perfect script or something, when really what perfect means is something that's going to get people excited. How does a writer know that their script is strong enough to start sending out to people? How do you know it's ready to, start putting all that effort behind?
I think you share it with people who you can reasonably assume have some familiarity with what a good script looks like, and ideally people who are already in the industry. And when those people are telling you consistently, this is amazing, I want to share it with this other person I know, then you know you're onto something. When a person tells you, I really like your script, but doesn't volunteer to like share it, that's a soft pass, right? When someone really, really loves something, they will come to you and say, I love this. Who do you want me to send it to? What do you need from me? How can I be helpful, right? I would like to talk to you further about it. How can I get involved? That's what real enthusiasm about a piece of material looks like. I liked it. That's a person being kind, usually. The other way, and again, not everybody has access to people like that, right? So if you don't have access to people like that, then you need to find other people. Maybe it's via the internet, maybe it's through forums like this, maybe it's through the blacklist. If that feedback is not great, you can say, okay, I'm going to stop giving the blacklist my money. I'm going to do a rewrite. And then only when I've exhausted all of the free ways to make this thing better, then I'm going to invest another little bit of money to get feedback and see how it goes. But when the feedback is extremely positive, then we start telling everybody, right? Because we have the credibility within the industry that when we say, hey, this is something worth paying attention to, other people will then pay attention to it. Still exhaust every free resource at your disposal to make the script as good as it possibly can be before spending money on it on the blacklist or anywhere else.
Yeah. And you could also do the work in returning the favor, in reading their work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which, honestly, I highly recommend writers groups because I think it's so much easier to see things in other people's work than it is in your own work when you're so close to it. You learn so much more reading other scripts and even the problems in other scripts and helping find a solution in that script. And then you're like, oh, I saw something. Whereas we're so close to our own work, it can be very difficult sometimes to really see things.
You may be writing the thing alone, but if you want to get your thing made, you want to have a professional career, it's a lot of working with other people and being able to be a productive, creative partner is a large part of the job, as much if not more than having a fire pen.
How do I go about seeking representation? So this particular question, he's got several scripts in his portfolio, but I think you can also answer this more broadly on what kind of tips do you have in seeking representation, and at what point in a writer's development should they seek representation?
First of all, okay, you have several completed copywritten scripts. Great. You need to figure out which is the one that is the best one, the one that you would bet your career on, because in many ways, every time you send it out, you are. So what's the one that you are most proud of that you think is the most face-meltingly good script? First, figure that out. 2, make sure it's as good as it humanly possibly could be. Again, exhaust all free resources at your disposal to make that thing as good as it can be. At that point, if I was in your position, I would host it on the Blacklist website and purchase feedback on it. Take the feedback, see how it goes. If it's an 8 out of 10 or better, we're going to start telling people, including a lot of agents and managers, hey, this is a really good script. You should do something with it. But that's also producers, talent, et cetera, et cetera. And then if the feedback is not good, then you got to take stock and say, is this one person who didn't like it? Am I sure that it's really good? Do I want to pay for more feedback? Do I want to ask for some free additional opinions before I spend any more money on it? Literally, the reason we built the Blacklist website was because there was no answer to this question. And I got tired of not having a good answer to it. And I recognized that it's bad for writers that the industry doesn't have a good answer to that question. It is worse for the industry if there is talent out in the world that we can't find, because then we are unable to profit from it.
In terms of like people's querying, or trying to get their work out there, do you recommend like trying to get representation first before like trying to send an email to a producer, or to someone like you when you were working as an executive at Leonard DiCaprio's company? Would you have read a script someone sent with you, or would they have needed a rep first for you to read that?
All right, here's the reality. Most people are not reading queries. I think if you have a query that for some reason is just like inspires morbid or excited curiosity, maybe somebody responds and says, this sounds amazing. I have to read it. But you probably don't have that script and you probably don't have that query. What makes people read scripts is it's really just, it's if they believe the script is going to be good. And so how are you going to convince people that your script is good? You're going to convince people that your script is good 9 times out of 10 by somebody else saying that it was good. So who's that person going to be? For most people who are working professionals in the industry, it's a representative. They have an agent or manager who read something at some point that made them say, I love this person's writing. I think I want to represent them and help them build their career. I think I can make money doing that, right? Most working professionals have that person. You also have people that are working professionals in the industry as producers or executives, and they've read your work, and even without you knowing about it, they're sharing it because it's good, right? That's how the blacklist came into being, was industry executives, in addition to getting things from agents and managers, they're sharing stuff amongst themselves. Hey, this is a good script. You should check it out. This is a writer you should look into hiring. Oh, I need a list of writers that can do X, Y, or Z. That's how you find out. So like, again, third-party validation, that's how these scripts are getting read.
But I think that's it. I would love to just leave with any parting words of wisdom, advice, however you want to interpret it. Just kind of what would your final word be to our audience of aspiring and perhaps some working screenwriters watching us right now?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Times are weird. I don't think I need to tell anybody that. And I think times are hard. And I think there's a lot of reason. Like, I understand the fear and I understand the anxiety. There is a contraction happening. There's a lot of fears about AI, and understandably so. And at the same time, there's a massive amount of opportunity, right? It's never been easier if you have, it's never been easier to watch the history of cinema and to educate yourself on writing and how film works and how things get made and how to make something yourself. That has never been easier than it is right now. It has never been easier if you have something great to get it to people who can do something with it. That's a fact, no matter who you are, right? And it is also true, and it will always be true, that when you write something great that has a business model behind it, where there is an audience for it, it can be made for a price that is below the cost it is to make it, there is opportunity there. And these big spec sales over the last couple of weeks show that. What I'd ask is, I think it's really important to remember that watching movies, watching TV, these are things that really do bind us together as like humankind and really inform the way we see ourselves and the way we see each other. And it is almost religious, certainly ritualistic, when we think about like going to a movie theater every Friday night or watching a TV show every week. And then and especially with movie theaters, you're going to a physical space and sitting next to someone you don't know while someone tells you a story about what it means to be human. Like, that's what I did in church every Sunday in West Central Georgia when I was a kid, right? It is literally a religious experience on some level, and it's an incredibly powerful one. And I remember this interview with Tupac Shakur shortly before he was killed, and he was asked, Tupac, do you think your music will change the world? He's like, no, I think that's kind of a ridiculous question. But I do think that my music will change the minds that change the world. And so I think it's really important to remember that, like, the impact of what you make and share as a filmmaker, even if it's just to 10,000 people, it's unquantifiable, the effect that you have on the way that they see the world, but it's also undeniable in aggregate. And so it's really important that you ask yourself, like, what stories am I trying to tell? How am I trying to make people feel? How am I trying to make them see themselves? How am I making them trying to see the people in their lives, the people they're sitting next to in the theater, the people that they will see the next morning when they're on their commute after watching the TV show that I wrote, right? And that doesn't mean you have to be super serious. It doesn't mean that you have to like try to, say something really important. Maybe it means you just make people laugh a lot. Maybe it means that you make people feel really, really good because it makes it a little bit easier for them to survive all the other hard stuff that we have to endure. And so I think it's important to think about, like, what is it that you are going to write? What stories are you going to tell? How are you going to leave people feeling? What mark are you going to leave on them? Because when you get it right, it leaves a real mark on all of us. And think about the things that have left a mark on you and how they've changed how you see yourself and how they changed how you see the world, what you think is possible, what you think is impossible, who you think is a hero, who you think is a villain. Like, think deeply about that and really aspire to greatness, because greatness is what it takes. You have to be soaring in whatever you do. Good enough isn't good enough. So like, figure out what that thing is.